culture, and all those things come before the internet. When the internet comes, then what it does is that it mediates all those different cultures that we have. So when I as a Colombian enter the internet, what I'm faced there is a set of communities that intermingle this nationality, that the set of values that I bring as a Colombian, the communities bring as a Colombian, in conversation with the digital interfaces. So the hegemonic idea of digital culture then is wrong, right? Because that presumes that the digital is only one thing and that culture is only one thing. And it couldn't be like it's so different. You'll encounter so many different cultures online and in face to face, as you all know. So it's always good to come back to that like all the variation that there is. Like it is true that there is a different Colombian internet that is in conversation with all the other internets all the time, but there's still good to remember that the important part of the term digital culture isn't culture. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And actually, we did a little study on one aspect of the Colombian social media environment quite recently. Do you
Right.
want to talk about that?
Uh, I'm a little lost.
Well, it is 8 a.m., but you have no excuse because this is
No,
5 p.m. No, Medellin on Telegram.
right. I'm sorry. It's not because of time. It is because I just came back from the holiday. So what we did a study on Telegram, on a local Telegram on my home city, that is Medellin. And they have this large scale channel, group community in Telegram that people can join to discuss everyday events in the city. So, for example, there will be, I think it's 100,000 people right now talking every day about traffic, talking about security, talking about football, and we were interested in knowing about how people were talking here about violence in particular, and about how violence was kind of intermingled with all these other topics. So what we did was we did through Community that I think is a conversation that we'll have in some weeks. Uh, we downloaded all the information and all the information about the messages that people were posting in the chats from specific topics, and we kind of started to see the toxicity in these conversations, trying to see how online toxicity as a construct operates within the particular culture of Colombia. So as you see, you start to see all these nuances about what culture really is here. And what we found out is that you can really only understand toxicity or violence within lenses of like specific social processes that have to be grounded within the particular communities. So, for example, for them, it was normal to engage in violence against others, against migrants from Venezuela, because it was a way to signal to other Colombians that they were in, that there was we are the ones who belong and they are the ones who don't. So this study, I think, in short, what it does is that it really highlights the importance of understanding culture when trying to understand any phenomena online, trying to really pay attention to the specific values and ways of making sense of the world that are present within anything you do, whether you're trying to design a campaign for like communication, or whether you're trying to design coverage of something. You have to understand the cultural nuances that are present in how people interact online.
Yes, yes, you really do. And part of those cultural nuances that we're also reading about this week has to do with how memes are used, right? And we had this
Mm.
really great reading this week about how memes are used sort of politically in Indian context to speak out, against the government in some ways. Um, what do you think about that? So this sort of bricolage, as it were, of taking like
Yeah.
internet practices and then combining them with local cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. Memes are so interesting because I think they are pretty much the materialization of culture in a lot of ways. You only understand memes when you are embedded within particular cultures. And sometimes those culture will be mainstream, so they'll create a meme about, I don't know, France, or they'll create a meme about, I don't know what's mainstream right now, about Drake and Kendrick Lamar. I don't know,
Yeah, the Coldplay
whatever.
couple.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that kind of things that are mainstream. But I think, and this is just me making up numbers, but I think 95% of memes are not designed to be mainstream. Rather, people design them to respond to their specific cultures. And
Mm,
cultures, I think mostly is about like national cultures or local cultures. There's so much in the gaming culture about responding with memes to specific things that are happening in the anime culture as well. Uh, but for example, with political contestation, as you were saying, like this is the space where you can use like a material cultural product to respond to a political situation in ways that people who are embedded in the situation can make sense of it and laugh or bring attention to it. So it is wonderful. I really like memes as a product of like the materialization of culture. But I also want to say that it's important to remember that uh, like culture online is not free. Is not, and by that I mean it's not able to free flowly. It's not able to flow freely. Is what I meant
yeah,
to say.
yeah.
Sorry. Rather, it is constrained by the logics of platforms. That means by the interest of platforms. So we have seen many cases of platforms banning memes concerning
Mm-hmm.
political causes. Well, vaccines is the first case, but maybe there is other instances where the side that is being oppressed decide that should have the right to post, but Facebook says no, or Twitter says no, or LinkedIn says no, or digital culture is also not only social media, right? We have like online forums of the BBC, of New York Times. These are also spaces that these kind of dynamics happen, and where we also need to pay attention to what kind of things are allowed to circulate and which kind of things don't.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up because I was just reading Jody Dean, and you probably know this, but for the students, so Jody Dean is a really incredible scholar of social platforms, and she talks about communicative capitalism. But we won't get into all of communicative capitalism right now. But one of the things she said that has really resonated with me is that we think of these network technologies as being non-hierarchical, right? We think of like anybody has a chance to say whatever they want. But actually, the property of networks is that they're very hierarchical because
Yeah,
some people's messages get out to everybody, but most people's messages don't. They only reach one or two people. So I think that's how I'm interpreting, what you just said is yeah, culture does not flow freely. Some people have much more power to make culture than others. Like, myself in this class, I might have more power to set the culture of the class, which is
yeah,
great. But on a global scale, I have very little power. But somebody
yeah,
like Joe Rogan has a ton of power because,
yeah.
I guess Taylor Swift now has the most listened to podcast. Woo woo, Tay Tay. But but up until this week, I think Joe Rogan had the most listened to podcast. So
Yeah.
somebody like that has a lot more power to set that. Um,
And and,
yeah,
and and I think it's important to like recognize the two sides of this coin. So on the one hand, yes, there are some interest at play about who gets to be visible and who's not, like who has the power to show and who's not, whose interests are at play here. So in the case you just said, like, well, in the case we're discussing, like political representation, it's obviously a case where you want people to have more freedom to express themselves and to circulate ideas. But also, we should also pay attention to sometimes we don't want things to circulate freely, and sometimes we have to have protections in place. And which is why, for example, WhatsApp is a major concern in Latin America because there is little precautions that we can take to stop certain things from circulating freely. For instance, there are, I know in Medellin it was a practice, at least a couple of years it was a big issue, when men were collecting pictures of women naked from their city, putting them in a shared folder and circulating them on WhatsApp. This is a form of patriarchal violent culture being represented online and being led to circulate freely when really it shouldn't, right? It's also about quality. It's also about justice. It's also about paying attention. Uh, who gets to be to circulate without consequences when they shouldn't, right? It is a complex issue for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So now going from the regional cultures and how they influence digital culture, I want us to talk a little bit about how digital culture has its own culture.
Oh
And
yeah.
for the class, Esteban and I were involved in a project where we hired some research assistants, people much like yourselves, to help us write about digital culture and what was in the literature. And one of the people we hired, I think one of the reasons why we hired her is because she said, "Well, I want to just look at digital culture as its own culture." And we were like, that's brilliant. Let's do that. And so we did. We both looked at the regional cultures and how they impact digital communication, and also we looked at a digital culture itself. So how is it that and what is maybe is let's start there. What is digital culture?
That's a great question. And I think it's a problematic question because we've been struggling for definition forever. It's rather about how you define culture identifies a certain way to approach it. In general, the way I like to approach it is culture as a thing is about how we as communities make sense of the world. That entails a set of values, a set of principles, a set of priorities in life. Uh, and then digital culture means that embedded online, like how those things are mediated. So, as you said, that kind of takes two forms. On the one hand, is about how cultures are mediated digitally. So, the Colombian case, how Latin American culture is mediated online. So, there's a form of digital culture there. How manhood is mediated online, that's a form of digital culture. But also, we have these things of culture that are exclusively online. So we have, for example, gaming cultures that are particularly there. Um, I'm doing right now a study on communities on Reddit that try to be positive about the world, and that's their own culture. Like, right, they're embedded in themselves in the sense that they're not trying to replicate something. Rather, they're trying to create a sense of making sense of the world within the internet culture. And we have also influencers. We have many new manifestations of digital culture that are exclusive to the online sphere. And it's really interesting because a key thing is that while we might think of them as exclusively online, I think we know with influencers, for example, their impacts are way beyond online. They start to influence politics. They start to influence how we talk to each other. They start to influence what we prioritize as societies. So, really important topic.
Oh yeah, so we checked out the White House Instagram page. I think it was
Mm.
last week. And I don't. I mean, I was shook and I think that many people in the class might have been as well. So when you say how digital culture like impacts politics, like that's where I can see it right now is basically the White House Instagram is a series of AI generated memes like propaganda and like things that are like optimized for digital, but and that's how they're communicating with the public. Like it's just blowing my mind. And this is the leader of the free world. But since you mentioned a study, we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, which is fantastic, and I'm going to start asking them soon, everybody. But what I want to ask you is, what are your favorite ways of studying digital culture?
It really depends on what you want to understand about digital culture. I think there are various approaches. I'm a big fan of mainly two approaches. One is what I like to call like a slow approach, just that pretty much immerse myself within the communities. So in the case I just mentioned on Reddit, I'm doing an ethnographic study where I immerse myself in the community. Every day I check what they're talking about. Every day I try to understand like the dynamics of what gets more visibility, what gets less, what kind of topics are prioritized, what kind of ways of seeing the world are prioritized. So I think that's one way, the slow way. And I think the other way is fast, not because it requires less effort, but rather because it prioritizes scale and computational tools via, for example, tools like Communalytic, that again, I think we'll talk about it in a few weeks. Uh, well, we can take more, instead of trying to understand the dynamics over time, we take a snapshot of what the community is at the specific point in time, and then we use a variety of tools from toxicity analysis to thematic analysis to then try to understand more specific issues there. So I think those will be my two favorite approaches, but I think there is so many methodological approaches that you can take that is more about your question, I think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And for the class, we're gonna get into this after week 6. So after your explainers are due, we break, and the second half of the class is all on methods. Esteban's gonna come join us and show us one of these fast methods. So we'll talk in detail about that later. But right now, I'm gonna poke you a little bit more and say, um, can you tell us a little bit more about the slow method that you're doing on Reddit right now? So are you just like, do you just hang out on Reddit? Like, what is, and I know again, we're going to talk about ethnography too, probably week 8
Yeah.
of the course, but maybe you can give us a teaser. So what does it look like?
Yeah. So this is digital ethnography. It is a method that pretty much when the internet came up, people started doing forms of digital ethnography there. But of course, if you're going to talk about digital ethnography, like ethnographies have been around forever. And it was mostly about somebody going to a culture and trying to immerse themselves in the community to understand their values, the ways of making sense. Uh, so we see them with, like, sadly, with indigenous communities from very colonial perspectives, etc. But that's pretty much what I try to do here, minus the problematic part, I hope. But I immerse myself in the communities. And in short, yes, I pretty much hang out there. And I try to be part of the community. I try to read what people are posting. I try to participate in the community. I try to be part of it. But of course, it's not just that. I have to follow a set of first ethical procedures to be sure that everything is going well. I'm engaging in forms of data collection, so I am taking notes. I'm also collecting some of the people's interactions. I'm keeping a journal to keeping my observations all the time. I'm trying to engage in more creative ways. I'm trying to draw sometimes, so some flows of communication that I see. Uh, and of course, you can also, and I am combining that with other methods. So in this case, I am combining the slow and the fast. I am doing this process of slow reading of the community while doing some other forms of analysis. That again, we'll see after week 6.
Yeah, yes, but can you tell us maybe one or two things that were really interesting or surprising that you learned through the slow method alone so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So um, I don't know how familiar you all are with Reddit, but Reddit has this kind of old school structure. It is very forum like. So somebody posts an initial comment, which is a video, a link to a news, or just a comment, and people start responding to it. My specific interest within this community is how people use harm in any way or toxicity in combination with this positivity that they try to create. Because I noticed that even though they try to portray themselves as overly positive in the community. You go inside the comments and you do notice people are attacking each other, insulting each other. So there's like this weird dynamic. I wanted to understand more of it. One of the things I saw, but only after I think 4 or 5 months of being there, is that people were using very intelligently the structure of Reddit to engage in ways of uh, prioritizing what's visible and what's not, in ways that are very nuanced. So what they were doing is reorganizing the conversation. The threads of conversation in Reddit are not as a timeline, right? The newest is not always up. Rather, what gets more upvoted is up. And the rest of the comments, like if you have 0 likes, then it's down. So people were weaponizing this tool to silence specific ways of communicating online, which can be seen as a form of violence. So, for example, when somebody posted an insult to a Democratic candidate, uh, people will, for example, voted. So it will be very visible up there.
Mm.
On the other hand, if somebody was saying something good about um, I don't know, let's say about there was a case about a woman who was doing a lot of things, and somebody said something about the power of feminism, something like that, and that comment was downvoted, and then you kind of had to scroll down to see.
Oof.
So that
Okay.
showcased the power of like infrastructures in shaping culture, like how such a thing as a downvote and an upvote serve as a way of silencing people and voices and messages and ideas.
Wow. Wow. So in other words, what the platform allows you to do can be used as a tool to shut people down and
Absolutely,
to
absolutely.
impinge free speech.
Yeah,
That's really interesting, especially if the community is supposed to be positive, but then they're upvoting insults towards certain people. Yeah, wow.
absolutely.
That's really interesting. Yes. So last question before we get to the group questions. Um, what do you think AI is doing to our digital cultures, if anything?
Oh gosh. Okay. Uh, yeah, complex question. I think we're still figuring it out because so what I'm gonna say is mostly from intuition. And it's just from what I've been seeing happening to the cultures I inhabit online. So on the one hand, I think there is like a series of movements that are happening. On the one hand, I think there is a homogenization of culture through AI. So memes created through AI right now are a thing. And are a thing created with a very particular aesthetic, very particular way of existing that I think kind of uh, simplifies culture, simplifies what things are supposed to be. I think AI also demonstrates how platforms uh, profit out of culture. It showcased just how much they are, how they're able to just collect and collect and collect and collect data like vampires of culture, kind of sucking the thing until they have it all within themselves. Um, it's also being a tool to visibilize specific cultures. There is the work of people right now in Ukraine or in Gaza and Israel, but there's particularly the work of activists within Gaza who are using AI to create images that can circulate online that will otherwise not be able to circulate. So they can show images, for example, of things that are happening. So what they do is they create images through AI to showcase specific things that are happening. And that's happening, I think, in different ways. So I will say it's not all bad. It's also used in interesting ways to visualize things that are not uh, automatically visible
Yeah, that does
otherwise.
sound interesting. So maybe not bad, but I love that image of platforms as culture vampires. I think you should write
Oh
about
yeah.
that. And that actually has inspired me. So class, take a note. if you're not listening, perk your ears up because we've got an off topic. And the off topic, Esteban, is what I do to make sure people are paying attention to either the live stream or the video. For our off topic this week, class, I would like you to draw me a little picture. It could be a stick figure if you want. I want to see what your interpretation of a cultural vampire is. So please draw me a picture of a cultural vampire and stick it in our off topic channel in Discord. This is our off topic, catch you listening activity. And Esteban will be joining us in Discord this week, so he'll be able to see too what a cultural vampire looks like. I can't wait to see all of your art. And yes, stick figures are fine. I'll draw one too. I always participate in off topics, so you can see my my. Now I have to think of what a cultural vampire. Let's see, I've done it to myself. But let's get to some questions from the class because this class asks such great questions. So MC would like a preview of what's coming down the pipe. MC is asking, how did you get access to Telegram data for your work?
Yeah, so access to data depends on a lot of things. It depends on the platform, it depends on the settings of the group, and it depends on the tool you're using to access this. So in the case of the tool, Telegram, it's a very open platform for good and for bad, but it's very easy to access Telegram data. They have all the facilities to offer the data for researchers. So I use Telegram because of that. The specific groups we're analyzing was an open group, as I said. So it's not like if you create a group with your friends that is only invite, I will not, like nobody will be able to access that data. But because this group was open, I told you it has over 100,000 people in it. It is possible to access the data easily. And to access the data, then I use Communalytic, which is the thing we're going to talk about in the second half of the course, which acts as an interface between your needs and what the platform offers. So it kind of facilitates the process of you select pretty much the channel, you select a period of time, and you select I want to download all the messages. And it gives you a huge CSV file or Excel file that you can then use for your things. And it works with Reddit. It used to work with Twitter, now it doesn't. It used to work with Facebook, now it's really hard to do so. It works with YouTube, I think still, but it might take some time to get there. And it works with Blue Sky as well. And I think that's it, but there are other tools to access other platforms. Although, as you know, platforms have been downgrading their politics. I think is a polite way to say it. And that involves that they have been restricting more and more access to data. So it depends on what you want to do, will be possible or not.
Yeah, and I think you've made a couple good points actually. So the first one is this idea that it's an open group. For example, in the second half of this course, you all have an assignment where we're going to ask you to do some analysis of a group. But make sure it's not something where you have to be accepted into the group to join, right? If it's a closed group, then we need to actually get specific ethics approval for that.
Mm.
If it's an open group, then research ethics at Royal Roads has told us that it's okay because they're open to the public, anybody can see it. So yes, you can go in and you can do a little bit of analysis there. So that's one thing to keep in mind for now. And I know you're all going into your research projects after this class. So if you were thinking of doing digital research for your research projects, that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is, the API issue. So API being the application programming interface that allows tools like Communalytic to scrape the data. That changes all the time, right? So right now we know that, we can use a tool like Communalytic to access Telegram. Hopefully by the time you come back and join us in a few weeks, Esteban, we'll still be able to do that. But these platforms are changing all the time. And that's why there was a whole ton of research on Twitter. We've read some of it in this class, but there's not going to be as much in the future because you have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to access that data now. So I think that's a pretty important aspect of, will we be able to really know what's going on these platforms if we can't
Hmm.
study them. That's something that digital researchers are asking every day.
Yeah.
Derek asks, what happens if you choose to not be part of a digital culture, or if you're trying to keep your kids off of social media? What are the consequences of this decision? And he says, is there a happy medium? That's a deep question, Derek.
Is there a happy what? Right?
Is there a happy medium? So, like, can you choose? I would actually wonder, can you even choose not to be part of digital culture anymore? Even if you're not online, does digital culture
Mm.
still reach you? But Derek asks, yeah, what happens if you choose to not be part of a digital culture or keep your kids off of social media? What are the consequences of this decision? And is there a happy medium?
Yeah, I think that the issue again is that digital culture is not constrained to digital platforms now, and I think you'll see more and more. You go somewhere else, and they'll be talking about. Did you saw the video on the Coldplay concert where they caught the two couple? That's digital culture taking shape in person because that was transmitted through TikTok. It was everywhere online. That's how people found out. That's where people had the conversation, and it's kind of percolated into our everyday lives. Uh, the music we choose to listen to right now is mediated through what people are listening to in other places and what
K-pop
gets
demon
prioritized.
hunters.
So digital culture kind of it's everywhere right now. So I don't think it's a matter of escaping. It's rather a matter of being uh, intentional about how we engage with it and how we are smart about how we participate in these cultures, right? Or to which cultures do we decide to participate fully? Which cultures do we try to avoid? And the question with kids is obviously it's very, very complicated. Right now is happening everywhere. I think in Australia still have a problem, and the UK as well, with banning kids with social media, which is a complex issue. Which I'm gonna be honest, I don't know enough to have an informed opinion. I don't think it's as simple as banning it. I think it's about how, and again, it is a matter about how do we uh, engage with it critically. I don't know, but I'll be curious if Jaigris has any thoughts on this. And I'll go back to the happy medium maybe later.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is a tricky question, Derek. With regards to kids, I think we need to do two things. One of them is model the behavior we want to see. So, if parents are always on, Instagram or what have you, TikTok, um, then that's what kids see. Kids learn from you, right? So I think there's that modeling not being on devices. And the other thing is making sure you sit with your kids, and because if you take away their ability to be on digital culture, you're also taking away their ability to think critically about it. It is better to sit with them, to spend that time um, teaching them how to not become like a helpless victim to whatever is happening in the cultural morass, and instead thinking about how can we make sense of this. Is this something we want to be a part of? Is this a trend that's good for us? Is it not? What is this doing to our culture outside of
Hmm.
this? So that balance between parents not being on too often, and then probably the happy medium is kind of limiting time for everybody, and then when you are on, being on together as much as possible so you can talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think this is a conversation that it's not new, but it's also a repetition of many conversations we had for a long time. Should we ban video games? Should we ban TV? Should we ban all these sorts of mediated spaces as if the mediated spaces themselves were the problem? Rather, it is about what kind of conversations should not be freely available for kids in these spaces. What kind of conversation will be productive for kids to engage with all the time there, right? It is a tool maybe for immense growth for kids to be with. I don't know. Uh, Talk about Bluey. I don't know. I don't know what the thing is right now. but there's certainly positive uses of it and also very negative downsides. So how do we address the downsides without losing the ability to engage with the positives? And I think that talks as well about the happy medium. Just very briefly, because that's a huge question. Um, a, a medium is a medium, right? A medium, it's something that uh, interfaces our interaction with the world in specific ways. So I think a happy medium is only possible in a happy world, on a specific happy world, and I don't think we're there quite yet. I was thinking, for example, with platforms like meditation apps or
Hmm, yeah.
communities such as Headspace that were trying to be happy for some time and to be happy mediums, but they were swallowed by the market. But that, yeah,
That
it's a big thought. Yeah,
Yeah, it is a big thought, and maybe we can keep thinking about it. Maybe you can tell
yeah,
us, Derek, on
yeah.
Discord if you find the answer. Oyen says, "Would you say the culture of a particular society impacts the digital culture of the people in that society?"
Absolutely, without a doubt. So just to go back to that study that Jaigris mentioned before, where we were working with the research assistants and kind of understanding culture, and it was located within three specific contexts. It was Colombia, Iran, and Canada. And we very quickly came to the conclusion that there are very similarities. We are all responding to particular geographical needs, but there are also many, many differences. Really, how you make sense of the world in your particular place shapes how you interact online. What kind of things you prioritize? What kind of things you like to see? How you like to communicate? So, yes, short answer. Yeah.
Uh, Delali asks, "How are you conducting the study on Reddit while avoiding the risk of being trapped in an echo chamber that could limit the validity of your findings?" This is such a fabulous question. And then it goes on to say, "Are you able to understand a community's culture if you don't have any knowledge of their special way of using language? For example, a group relying on dark jokes to communicate." I think this is a great question for you, Esteban.
Yeah. So both questions are important. Uh, the notion of echo chambers is interesting here because, well, these communities are not secluded communities. They're interacting with many others. So I don't think they are echo chambers. Rather, they respond to particular values and particular ways of being when people transition to these communities. I'm trying to explain how Reddit works very simply because you don't really go to Reddit to be in one community. Rather, you go to Reddit to jump between communities. And that shapes how everybody engages with everything in the platform, right? Um, but as you said, Lali, and I think just raising the question is the issue, right? How are you aware that you cannot be trapped within the specific communities in a way that doesn't let you see everything else? And I don't think that's a question for researchers, but there's also a question about us as users of online spaces and as communication professionals or media professionals, as people who can engage in the professional world that is highly mediatized right now, is how do we avoid being trapped by a culture that doesn't allow us to see outside of it and see the value of other ways of being, the value of other ways of communicating. So I think it's just about doing exactly what you just did, Lally, and asking the question over and over. I think that's what I try to do. It's a challenge, but yeah, I hope to keep trying it. And about the dark jokes and all this stuff, that's a great question because that's a problem for everybody. Try to navigate different communities that you don't belong to. But that is why it's a slow method because understanding the jokes takes a long time. And it was only when I was in my fifth, sixth month of doing the research that I had to understand that, oh, people are referencing back that thing that was posted 2 months ago and that was huge in the community and they're making jokes about it. And if I just kind of jump into the community and saw the conversation without context, I will have missed it. but that's why you can immerse yourself in it to try to make sense of it. But you're always gonna miss some things. We all miss sometimes things when we participate in these communities. Same as real life, right? When you enter a new class and people have jokes because they were in another class before, you just try to keep up. Yeah, I don't know what other advice I can give. I hope that was a good answer to that. But if not, I'll be happy to keep the conversation going.
No, I think that's a great answer, and I mean, Delali, yes, we can keep the conversation going in Discord this week as well. But I think that is exactly why we can't just do fast methods, big data all the time. We need to do some of the
Yeah.
slow methods of getting to know these cultures or talking to people about them, so that we can really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Katie says you mentioned culture both in terms of geography as well as other aspects of identity. And she was wondering if you could expand on how digital culture is either breaking down or building up borders.
What a simple question that I can address in 2 minutes. This
Katie, that's
is,
a
I
very
think,
complex question and we love it.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that question. Uh, I think the response is both. It is creating new orders. It is destroying old orders. It is preserving orders. It is doing all these things at the same time. And it is always a mix of uh, like top down. What do platforms privilege? What kind of things are allowed to be easier? So there are certain ways of being that are easier to exist online. For example, YouTube. It's a very good example. If you go and Google for videos of Joe Rogan, you'll be very quickly immersed in Joe Rogan culture because that's something that YouTube prioritizes or Spotify prioritizes. But if you go and Google experiences of, I don't know, queer people in Colombia, you'll get maybe one recommendation of a next video that will talk about the same. And I think that's just one way in how platform prioritize certain experiences over the others and how specific cultures are preserved over others. And that varies across platforms, of course. But culture is not top down, right? There is also ways of resistance and reappropriation, and all these things also shape how culture exists. So all these new orders are meant to exist. People invent new ways of communicating. People invent new way of circumventing the platform rules. People decide that there are new topics that they want to talk about, even if the platform doesn't want them to. So everything you just said at the same time, I think will be my short answer.
Nico writes, thank you, Esteban. I would like to ask what are the potential consequences of shutting down an online social media, I guess, site, since they are basically businesses? Could digital cultures suffer from marginalization if the sites they're on are shut down? Good question.
Great question, but all great questions. Thank you so much. I was starting to relax and just my brain is on fire right now. Um, Absolutely. Like when a platform closes, you lose the core of people. It doesn't even have to close, it has to change. I think there are two examples that come to mind. When Twitter became X, there was a lot of digital culture that just didn't match the new principles of the platform. There's specifically a big community, something that was called Black Twitter. That was a community of people mostly in the US that identified themselves as Black people, and that came together to Twitter to engage in ways of communicating that make them happy, that make them feel connected to one another. And when Elon Musk bought the company, they decided that that was not the case anymore. And then they migrated to many different platforms in ways that kind of dissolve its coherence and its impact. That also happened in Tumblr. maybe in a
Right, yeah.
less direct way. That was huge. Tumblr was a huge for many different communities that were not so represented in other spaces. And then it was bought by Yahoo, and then it was implemented a lot of governance mechanisms that uh, made a lot of the people lose interest in it, and it got dissolved. But again, you go back time and time to all the platforms that have disappeared, and there's so much cultural richness that was lost there. Uh, but I guess that's what happens, right? Culture comes and goes. But it is good to pay attention to this things when it happens. Yeah, thank you for that question. That was good.
Yeah, and I think that it brings up another point for us each to think about, as people who live in culture and create culture ourselves. Like, how much do we want to be creating these cultures on platforms that aren't safeguarding them? Right? Like, used to be, if people were, say, writing in a paper journal, and that journal could be found many years later by grandparents or or grandchildren rather, or historians or anybody else, and people could reflect on what life was like back then. But if we decide that we're going to put our journal online and write a blog instead, and I'm guilty of this, I don't have a paper journal, then that could be gone, just gone at any point in time. And did you hear, Esteban? So I don't know how many of you know about the Internet Archive project,
Yeah,
but there's a nonprofit that is dedicated to preserving websites, and you can go back, you can look up what Royal Road's website looked like in the 90s. It's really cool. But is it true that the Trump government is cracking down on the Internet Archive for archiving things they don't like?
I don't know about that. I do know that they have been facing legal changes for I think 3 or 4 years now, and they are losing more and more access to things they were able to archive. They're being defunded, they're being
Yeah,
attacked, they're being sued. It is a campaign to erase the history of the internet.
and that's culture writ large.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not disconnected to the efforts to defund libraries, to defund museums, to defund everything, right?
Yeah,
Taking seriously digital culture means also taking seriously the internet as cultural infrastructure and paying attention to how our memory works there. How do we recover what we were here? Like go back to the 90s, go back to the early 2000s. Uh, that will be embarrassing for some of us, maybe, but it's good that that history exists and that we're able to remember how things were, right?
yeah, I agree. And Derek put the web address for the Internet Archive into the chat, everybody, if you want to check it out. I do. I like to go back and do things like look up Royal Road's website back in the 90s. Royal Roads officially became a university in, I think, 96. So if you want to go see how far back you can go, then you can do that. Or, maybe more fun websites like Royal Roads. I'm such a nerd. Um, okay, Mari has a really great question, but I know that people are going to have to go. So before Mari's question, let's talk about the weekly activity. And then, if you have time to stick around, I have time to stick around. We can answer the last few questions, and then if people have to trickle out, they can. So you picked, you chose a weekly activity for us this week, didn't you?
Yes, yes, and that was very fun to think about. So I think uh, now you're probably all thinking about how digital culture impacts you, whether about the specific communities you belong to, whether you use X, whether you use TikTok, whether you follow specific communities on these platforms. We all participate on online culture in different ways, right? Or maybe it's not social media. Maybe it's you like to read a certain newspaper and you go to the section of comments to see what people are saying, or maybe you talk about other things offline that relate to digital culture. What the activity is, uh, you're gonna engage in the slow method, as said this week. You're gonna take it slow, but not because you're gonna immerse yourself in a new community, but because I want you to pay attention to what these digital cultures are and how they manifest in your life. So it's not super complicated. just notice how these communities happen. What kind of ways of making sense of the role do they have? What kind of communicative practices make them unique? What defines the culture that you participate in? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna write two short entries in the Discord that you're gonna share with the rest of us about the culture you belong to and what makes them unique, right? You're gonna take some time to pay attention to what the digital culture is and how it manifests. I don't know if is that clear? Is that
I think it's clear enough that I can write a few sentences in Discord to sum it up, and then you can let me know if I got it wrong, or you can come in and offer some feedback on it. So yeah, we're all a member of a digital community. We're all part of digital culture. So we're going to share one that we've been a member of, but treat it like you're a scientist. You know, sort of unpack it and think through what makes this culture unique. What are unique things about this culture that maybe other people wouldn't know? Like, are there,
mm,
is there dark humor or any humor? Is there,
yeah,
are there in jokes? Are there memes? How do people connect? What do they have in common? Etc. And you're going to write
yeah,
two entries in our weekly activity forum. I love it. Yes, that's an amazing weekly activity.
yeah. That's it. And I just want to say I mentioned two posts because I don't want you to get trapped in a picture of a thing. So you're gonna send the first post and you're gonna describe something about digital culture. But I also want you to keep reflecting on it and add on whatever you saw the first time. So you can either expand on the there's thing you noticed in the first post. You can see something else you noticed. But the idea of the two posts is so you don't just go in the community, see once, and then you're done. No, the idea is that you take some time between the two posts, reflect on it, maybe post the first one tomorrow and then next one next Monday, or maybe tomorrow on Friday, maybe tomorrow morning and tomorrow night. But take some time to reflect on the first post, and think more about what the community, see more about what's happening there.
That's really helpful because yeah, we had a question from MC.
Yeah,
What's the difference between the two posts? And you just answered it.
perfect.
So yeah, I guess we have one last question for those of you who want to stick around. It's a really good question. Mari says most of the time we hear the same voices or ideas, like in movies, news, social media, whatever, often from people in powerful positions in popular culture. But Mari says that we know podcasts are easy to create and share. So maybe they give more people, maybe smaller communities or different cultures or unpopular opinions a chance to tell their stories. So
Mm.
Mari asks, do you think podcasts can help break stereotypes and change how people think about certain groups or issues? And can you think of a podcast that did this for you or somebody you know? That sounds like a weekly activity in the future, Mari. But what's your response, Esteban?
That's a lovely, lovely, lovely question. I love it. Uh, Podcasts can work for reinforcing power structures or they can disrupt it, right? You can have, and I'm sorry to pile on Joe Rogan, but why not? You can have a figure such as Joe Rogan, who has a history of being in the media and being famous, being backed by a platform such as big as Spotify, and be in a podcast, and then have couple of school kids in a microphone in a school, creating a community, telling the stories about what's happening in their community, kind of disrupting the logic about what's news, what should we get to know, right? So again, it's not about the medium itself or by itself. It's rather more about what we do with it and what kind of things we do. And I think because of that, it's very important that we choose carefully what we consume, what kind of things we decide to pay attention to. Uh, you're asking me about my podcast, and it's a lovely, lovely question. Um, and I'm hesitating to give an answer because the only thing I can think of is what I'm listening to right now. I'm listening to a podcast that is called If Books Could Kill.
That's so
Uh,
good. I love that podcast.
it's so good, so good. I can share it in Discord later. And they pretty much take a book that's an airport book, so it's like very popular, and they talk about it critically. And they're also very funny, so that helps. But they're extremely smart and just had the best time listening to them. It's the combination of fun and critical that I enjoy when doing my dishes. So
Mm-hmm.
that just works for me. Yeah, if book could kill. Um, and yeah, there's a similar podcast called Maintenance Phase, which is more specific, not about books, but about health. Also very interesting to disrupt narratives about health. And yeah, those are the ones I can think of. I'll be interested to know about your all your podcasts too. So maybe that's another Discord comment.
Yeah, so maybe we could ask about that in Discord as well. So thank you all for sticking it out. Yeah, I know people have to go now. We're already over time, but I really appreciate all of you. Yeah, if you want to talk more with Esteban, he's committed to hanging out with us in Discord, although he will be
Yeah,
on European hours. So maybe Esteban will be in there when I'm sleeping. But I think some of you are
yeah.
up pretty late, so maybe you guys can connect that way. Thank you so much.